Welcome back to another episode. I am so glad that you dialed in this weekend. As you know, we tried to bring you inspirational entrepreneurs that all have different backgrounds and they share their stories. More importantly, they share their stories of success and how they found their pathway. And today's guest is no different. We have brought on with us today my friend Andrew Chesnutt.
Hey.
And Andrew, you and I, we met a little unconventionally. We were in Utah, and there's nothing like being in Utah and speaking to somebody. And I say, hey, so where are you from? And he's like, I'm from New York.
Absolutely.
Tell me more. All of a sudden we have this instant bond because we're both from New York. So we were there speaking. Obviously, at that time, I was speaking at Battle Collective, and you are this magnificent behind the scenes guy that makes everything happen. So welcome to the Credit Authority. I'm so glad that you can join us today. Tell everybody a little bit about who you are, your company, your backstory, because you're like an interesting fellow.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it. So I want to start off really brief bio about me. I have been in the learning industry for about 20 years, have worked for major corporations and got to the point where it's like the backstory to this. I was on a meeting and I was on a mastermind and somebody called me out going, okay, are you a generalist or are you a specialist? Now I'm newly in business at this point. I'll take whatever business would come my way. I'm going to get whatever clients. It doesn't matter if you want me to scrub your toilets. I'll do it because that's where I'm at. Right. And he was a doctor. He was a pharmacologist specifically and worked for a large pharma company. And he said to me, look, doctors all have the same MD. But what we do is we specialize in something. You have an oncologist, you have a pharmacologist, you have all of these specialties like a cardiologist. We all go into something, we become very good at one specific thing. And so after years of being in the industry, I've probably been in the industry at 11 years at that point, I decided to specialize. So what I did is I found what I love to do. I had been using PowerPoint for about 20 years at that point. And I just love creating a visual interpretation of what people are saying. So I love visually helping somebody to tell a story. And so that really got into this niche of doing PowerPoints, specific presentations for keynote speakers, think like TED Talks, things like that, helping somebody to tell their story, because that was part of what I did in the training industry. There's a lot of good science behind it, as well as online courses that then help them to kind of distribute their specific level of brilliance. And so that's the backstory behind why I specialize in this one very specific thing.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So, when you and I met, I even had to say to you, and it happens to me too. It's not, just you. So explain that again. Give me an example. So is it that you do this and then all of a sudden you start having a conversation, and this is the power of a one-on-one, right?
Absolutely.
There's so many times that you meet somebody and they want you to practice their, your 30-second elevator pitch. And then you go, that just left me even more confused. So we have to do this one-on-one. And the power behind the one-on-one is that I got to really learn about your expertise. And it automatically takes my brain as a serial entrepreneur, business coach, right? And I'm like, oh my God. So Andrew, you could work with this client and this client. And you think that because of your brand, you hear it in one way, but it's really opening up the horizons. There's no business owner or company that you can't represent.
That's very correct.
Yeah. How hard is it when you have a client that has a new product line that you've never been, now all of a sudden somebody reaches out to you and they're like, look, we really want to engage because you're the guy. And you're like, I have no idea what this product is. Like, how do you determine whether or not a client's even the right fit? Or do you have to delegate a certain amount of your proposal time to research?
So it depends on the individual vertical that the client works in. For me, I started in the customer service industry as a trainer, and it was an outsourcer. So we had a bunch of different clients, and so I've worked across a bunch of different industries. So I can call on that knowledge because as a trainer creating courses, what we would do is we train tier one customer support, but I had to have a pretty deep knowledge about what we were talking about. So if I'm training a mortgage servicing rep, I need to be able to know that there are 6 indexes that are used to come up with your interest rate, and the LIBOR is the most, is the best one. So stuff like that. So I need to be able to I can pull from that vast knowledge that I've built over the years, because that's part of what we do is take high level knowledge, boil it down and distill it to its essence and use that to help people. I'm actually doing that right now with a client who has a cosmetics line. Well, one of my other clients happen to also have a cosmetics line and be in the same industry. And so I'm able to pull some of that initial information, pull some of what I've learned from previous clients and move it into new ones. And so it allows me to be able to, I'm not an expert in any field. Definitely my clients are experts, but I have enough of a knowledge to be able to apply it and to generally have an idea about terminology, stuff like that. So it's really, I can work in a wide variety of things. So I'm usually stuck around like real estate and finance. But I've also been in healthcare, and I've been in cosmetics lines.
Now, one of the things I know as a business owner, PowerPoints are very impactful and quite necessary. Now, you and I have spoken about this before. I'm not a PowerPoint person. I want all eyes on me when I speak. So I generally don't use a PowerPoint, but that's not the norm. So what advice do you give to somebody, or what, when you're looking at a PowerPoint, you and I just had this conversation. You were like, I saw somebody's PowerPoint and all I wanted to do is shift the slides. Like you got so worked up, right? And you're laughing because it's true. So worked up because you're like, oh my God, no, your messaging is wrong. So what advice do you give to somebody that is putting together a PowerPoint, but they don't know that somebody like you exists?
Absolutely. So I want you to think for a second about musicians, specifically singers, like your favorite band. And I want you to think about what it would be like if you just had the lead singer singing. And then I want you to think about what would happen if you had a lead singer and a couple of background singers that repeat all of like the key points. Okay. Your PowerPoint should be like having those backup singers. So you should always be the center stage approach, kind of like what you do, where it's like, I want to be center stage, and that should be the way it happens. It should just be you should be the main focus. Everyone should be looking at you with your backup singers back there, kind of making sure they understand, hey, you need to know this term. Here's this concept. People learn visually. And so it's easier for you to be able to say something to them and then have something to back it up in the back. There's one thing that we do with one of my clients does a really specialized version of whole life insurance and using it as a banking system. And it's a really difficult concept for people to get. So what we came up with was this sort of circle, and it shows how it comes out of here, does this, goes this, and how it works. And it makes it so much easier for people to absorb that information, because if he was just talking about it, it'd be really difficult. So as far as PowerPoints are concerned, that's really what they're meant to do, is to be your backup singers to help you to get the concept across and to really help people to learn more efficiently. Now, as far as people are concerned and using PowerPoints, one of the big things I see a lot, I call it visual junk food. So these are things like a wall of bullet points, like 16 charts across it. Those graphs that nobody 2 rows back are going to be able to read. It's just not a thing, right? And people do this because it's a security blanket for them. I read off the bullet points because I'm not a very strong speaker, and I really need that security blanket to be able to do this properly. And there's some techniques that I can use to help someone so they don't feel like that anymore. They don't feel like they have to depend on it. So that's really one of the big things, is stop the visual junk food. It makes you feel good, but there's no nutritional value to it. It doesn't do anything to help you at all. So that's the number one biggest thing I see, is that visual junk food, not using it and getting the confidence as a speaker to not have to do that.
And what, just because I'm looking, we have about another minute or so left.
Sure.
When somebody's putting together a presentation and they know they have to speak for, let's just say 20 minutes or 30 minutes, is there a certain amount of slides that you recommend for somebody to have to keep them on point?
Completely depends on the person. For like a 20 or 30 minute presentation, I would recommend about 8 or 9, depending on how many concepts you have to present. So I've actually got a formula that I'll use to say, do 3 main topics, then the supporting topics underneath it. We build a thing out of that, but 10 out there, depending on how many topics. I've seen up to 20, just depending on if it's a really complicated subject or you have a lot of different things you're going through. But it really depends on each individual one. The way that I design them is, I'll write a script first just to make sure everything is flowing correctly and to make sure that the person that I'm working with, the client, is actually sees how this is going to. They can read it off in their head. They can sort of perform it in their heads. But then what we'll do is just do bullet points. You need to hit these 3 points on this one, and then we'll go on to the next one. Allows them some freedom as far as being able to kind of bulk it up to 30, down to 20. There's times when you're not going to have a full 30 minutes. There's times when you have, there's one event that I'm speaking at in January where I have 2 hours. I'm a talker, but that's going to be fun.
Yeah. Like I need my PowerPoint.
I definitely need my PowerPoint for that one. But what's going to happen is you kind of just expand and contract depending on what's necessary. So there isn't really a hard and fast rule. About 10 is good, but it might also be a lot more than that. Depends. Largest one I ever did was 600. It was a really complicated thing. On business tax laws and just how they worked and business corporate structures. And yeah, it was fun.
I love it. So with that in mind, we're just going to hang tight for a quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere. We have more with Andrew Chesnutt in just a few minutes. Okay, you good?
I'm good.
And welcome back to another episode of the Credit Authority. I am glad that you did not move the dial. We are with a friend of mine, Andrew Chesnutt, and we are live on LI News Radio, and we are a bunch of entrepreneurs, and there's nothing that I love more than bringing value and information to my business owners. And Andrew's specialty is PowerPoints and dealing with that business owner. So Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. We were talking about PowerPoints. So let's jump into something fun. Sure. It's not really fun. Actually, it's a little stressful for me right now. You're located in New York. You're up in Buffalo.
I am. Mm-hmm.
You will be taking the trip to Long Island because you will be helping me with this year's holiday dream. We have the Gift of Growth Conference. So first of all, thank you so much because I know that you are a fan of helping kids in need. And I know that it takes a village. And I said this yesterday, it does take a village for everybody to come together to pull off an event. So you work in the event space, which again is where I originally met you. How does somebody engage with you? So, you have this specialty, PowerPoints, behind the scene. How does somebody know they need you and how do they find you? I know how I found you, but now everybody else will, but how does somebody say, I think I need that guy?
Absolutely. So there's, as far as how to engage with me and where you could engage with me, like, is that, are you a good candidate? We'll put it that way. We'll start with that. So if you are a speaker, you're a good candidate for me. So if you've ever thought about speaking, so if you're trying to build your business, one of my first clients, we have a webinar that he has done. It's 90 minutes long. It explains the concepts he's going through. We have run it for 6 years. It has allowed him to build over $1 million business. So there's $1 million a year, I should say. There are ways to use PowerPoints as sales. It's a good sales technique. It's a good education technique. It will engage your clients. There's so many different ways we can use it. Cut it up, use it for social media, use it for public speaking. So if you are somebody who wants to build your business, who wants to go out, do speaking gigs, who wants that structure around how to tell your story. That's another thing I'm really big into is telling stories. There's some really great brain science around how that works. And getting people engaged. Think about the last time you saw a really good story and you're just sitting there, you're totally wrapped. You're just absolutely in that moment right there. There could be, a riot going on out there and you just really want to hear the story, So anyway, I do use it.
I will say for those that are listening and they want a good story, James Dixon, who Absolute Motivation. Everybody should go to his YouTube channel. He's a great storyteller because he has, I don't want to give away what makes him so unique. But if somebody comes to Holiday Dreams this year, the Gift of Growth Conference on December 13th, they'll be able to see James Dixon. So
absolutely.
I had to plug him there. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely do. I first saw him probably 2 years ago, and his story is so powerful. I mean, I'd go to the event just to hear him talk again, and I've heard it before. So it gives you some idea how powerful his story is. But, for me, that's really what it is. I want to help you go out and I want to help you build your business through that storytelling. And that's where PowerPoints and presentations can come from. What I fell in love with the TED format about 7 years ago when I helped my mom. She published a book and wanted to go do some speaking gigs. And one of the things we were going to do was a TED talk with her. And while that never quite came to fruition, I fell in love with this format. There's so many good things about it. There's a ton of good science behind it on why it works. And so what I want to do is take that ability, that a TED talk worthy presentation, and allow you to build it out. I got a kind of a formula I use for it, and then be able to present it to the world to give your specific piece of brilliance. As entrepreneurs, we have a brilliance inside of us. Each one of us are very, very good at something. Rhonda, you are amazing at credit. This is your big thing. It's a passion of yours. You're really, really good at it, and you can do so much good by giving that story. I do presentations. It's something that not a lot of people think about, but for me, it's my passion. I want to bring entrepreneurs' stories to life and allow them to be able to share it with others for the betterment of the world. And so we all have that special magic genius. So for me, it's not just about PowerPoints. It's also about making sure that you're able to go through and build your business with these stories and with this engagement. It's just such, I can go on for about hours on this, but I'll stop right there.
Because it's very, I'll say it's very interesting. I have another gentleman that I work with that you will meet when you come to Long Island. And he talks, his company is brand telling. And it's a very similar concept, because you have a business, but if people don't understand the nature of what you do or what separates you from somebody else, you are stuck, in that same pool as everybody else. You're trying to rise above. I actually did a class last night, and we were talking about how to become the authority in your industry. What does that look like? So when you are helping somebody do a presentation, you're helping them to highlight that they are an authority. You're also probably helping them pick out pieces of their story that are more impactful, or bring out pieces of their story that sat dormant that they did not think was relevant. Yeah. Right. So depending upon your audience, when I meet with somebody will say to me, well, what's your story? And all of a sudden, I will say, well, how much time, you always want to say, how much time do you have? And when I start my story, all of a sudden, you're engaging because you're bringing it back. I think that there has not been an entrepreneur that I met that didn't have a crazy story.
Absolutely. It's funny. Every entrepreneur has this sort of interesting backstory about them. I have one client who lived in Mexico, grew up there, moved over twice illegally to the United States, and dirt poor. His mom with substance abuse issues, and his brother, and that was it. And how he was able to build 31 companies based on that. So there's always that story. Another one, he was a punk skateboard kid who started his first company at 16, and started. If you're of a certain age bracket here in Buffalo, you probably bought your first snowboard or your first skateboard from his shop. It was a big brand around here. And, it's still in business to this day, but he's got this story about how he grew up dirt poor, dad was an alcoholic, left when he was young, and he had to overcome this. There's so many stories out there, and all of us entrepreneurs have some specific story behind us as to why we do what we do. For me, it was an FDA compliance training I had to write at one point. This was the breaking point for me. Now, if you ever had to write any sort of course on any one of the FDA, CGMP, 21 CFR 210 and 211, the fact I know that is a little scary.
I don't even know why I know that right now, but I do.
It's the code of the laws and regulations regarding pharmaceutical manufacture. Yeah. But anyway, I had to write this course for FDA compliance training, and what it was for call center reps. And if you do something wrong, and it's not hard to do this at all. If you did something wrong on the phones, you would be pulled into this training. It was retraining, just, hey, make sure you do it right the next time. But what happened is that my boss's boss, my boss's boss's boss, and I think 3 compliance lawyers came up with a proposal that had to be, this is all the material we want in it. And I think there was just about every regulation plus the kitchen sink in there. It was a terrible, terrible training. Took me a while to get it together. And I created this training, created a PowerPoint for it so the trainers could deploy it. It was 164 slides. And the only way I can explain this is academic assault. That's really it. It was bad. I felt badly for anyone that had to take this course. And of course, as soon as I get this thing done, we're in an FDA compliance audit. So there's an auditor on site. And auditors have no discernible sense of humor. So when he turns to me after looking at this abomination and said, is this meant to help or is this meant to punish? I realized at that point, right then and there, I probably didn't need to be doing stuff like that anymore. And that was really what started my journey of wanting to really help people to tell their best story, to do it in a way that's engaging and never commit academic assault again.
So how do people get in contact with you?
Easiest way to get in contact with me is to email me at Andrew@go, N as in Nancy, C as in Clarence, L as in Larry, S as in Sam.com. So my company is Nickel City Learning Solutions. We're in Buffalo, New York. We are the Nickel City. But if you email me at Andrew@goncls.com, that is the easiest way to get a hold of me. Also, you can see me on Instagram at Andrew Chesnutt, Chesnutt, because my ancestors kind of had a bit of fun time kind of making things a little difficult for us. I know who is detail oriented when I say my name. But again, on Instagram, at Andrew Chesnutt.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Stay tuned. We're getting ready to bring you another guest. And welcome back to another episode. I am